for tonight's discussion. I'm sure many of you will recognize this familiar face from Hawaii Now Daily on Hawaii News Now. Please welcome our moderator, Kainoa Carlson, and our panelists. McCabe Cox, Chief Operations Officer of Clean Energy Solutions, Hannah Hubank, Conservation Specialist at Oahu Conservation and Development, David Wong, President of Mountain View Farms. And I'm going to have Kainoa now take the stage. Thank you.
Hi, aloha, everybody. Aloha and good evening. And before we continue to move on in the program, how about one more hand for the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation, Wade, and of course, Denise. I was just thinking too, one thing I took from Wayne's speech was you are what you eat. And I was thinking about all of the mac salad and hamburger steak I have consumed over my lifetime. So I need to make changes, and I'm going to make changes. But for those of you who don't know me, my name's Kainoa Carlson. I work at Hawaii News Now, and I host a show called Hi Now. And the great thing about Hi Now is that it celebrates Hawaiian lifestyle, and food is such an integral part about Hawaiian lifestyle. So to be involved in a conversation that talks about the importance of Malama Aina is really special. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and introduce our three panelists. Our very first is McCabe Cox, Chief of Operations for Clean Energy Solutions.
Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay, it's on.
We can clap too.
Thank you. Yes, my name is McCabe Cox. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for a company called Clean Energy Solutions. And I also have a working relationship with local Suma Farms as well. And anyway, so a little background there is Clean Energy Solutions in particular is a independent energy producer as well as an agriculture technology company that specializes in a lot of different facets of energy production and agriculture production as well. And we have done a lot of studies and have grown a lot of varieties of different crops for particularly livestock feed as well as for energy production. And tonight we're going to be talking in particular about a crop called the giant king grass. In particular, we'll be talking about the hybrid giant king grass they call super giant king grass, and its unique, intriguing properties that are highly beneficial in a lot of different ways for local livestock production as well as for energy production and a really good sustainable alternative for different growers to consider. So thank you.
Big mahalo to McCabe. Our next panel speaker is Hannah Hubanks. She is the Conservation Specialist for the Oahu Resource Conservation and Development. Aloha, Hannah.
Thank you. As Kainoa mentioned, I'm the Conservation Specialist, and I also work as a Conservation Planner for Oahu RC&D. I have about 5 years of experience working with regenerative agriculture practices across the state. And a lot of what we do as an organization is helping farmers get the resources that they need to implement regenerative practices. So we are able to get grants and able to support farmers on the ground by giving them recommendations and helping them with conservation planning, which is a resource that's really helpful for planners to map out and see what all the opportunities are for a farmer to improve their operation. So we do that mostly just on island, but occasionally inter-island. And additionally, we provide a lot of network resources to farmers. The Women Farmers Network is a great way for women to connect with one another and farmer-to-farmer learning. So yeah, I think that's all I've got.
Fantastic. We're going to move on to our final panel speaker. He is David Wong, President of Mountain View Farms. And if you haven't been there, Mountain View Farms is in Waianae. So mahalo for making it down, David.
Thank you. We're super excited to be here. We're going to have a great opportunity to share some of the experiences that we have incurred in the last 9 years in regenerative farming and it's super exciting, and you'll hear the local boy version of what Wade said.
Just to give everyone kind of an idea, each panelist is going to have about 3 minutes to respond to each question. So if we're ready to go, we're going to go ahead and start. And as we should, we're going to start ladies first. Hannah, this first one is for you. Why regenerative agriculture? How will this help build a sustainable future here in Hawaii?
Yeah, sustainability, as Wayne did a great job of introducing, is really about balance. It's thinking about what goes in comes out, and what is used is replaced, and making sure there's a lot of diversity. And when left to itself, nature is the best at that. They're the expert of balance. So why regenerative agriculture is because it is mimicking nature. And when we mimic nature, we're getting all those benefits of balance. So what it does is it's focusing really on the inputs. And historically, you know, we've done a lot of focusing on the outputs. So it brings a great sense of balance back into the system that way. And one of the ways it does that is by utilizing nutrient-rich products like mulch and compost and putting that back into the system so that you can really replenish what's in the soil rather than depleting it. You know, such as taking a harvest takes a lot out, plant material, nutrients, water. So we're really looking at the science and also the historical, you know, knowledge that we have of how to put that back in the system. And that's something that when you do it over time, you're really building soil. And I think what's the most fascinating and wonderful part about why this is great for Hawaii and why we need to think about this for our future is that building soil is just one component, but we're also thinking about the opportunity to look at a landscape that needs to recharge watersheds with drinkable water. And, you know, when it rains, it hits the surface, and a healthy soil allows that to infiltrate down through the soil profile. And it goes into that aquifer, it's filtered. It's an awesome way to really utilize the most rainfall possible. But an unhealthy soil doesn't allow that, and it has to travel across the surface. And when it does that, it's picking up soil, it's eroding the soil. It's also picking up pollutants and carrying it over into the ocean. So it's really a lose, lose, lose. We lose the opportunity for the water, we lose the opportunity to replenish the soil, and we also lose the opportunity to protect our marine ecosystems. And I think it's important to think about how regenerative agriculture is just that win-win-win. It's doing all those things that we do want to see. And you think about the history of Hawaii and the way that we're, you know, looking at agricultural lands, we have nearly half of our acreage is designated and zoned for agricultural use. But while maybe not all of that is going to be viable for growing crops or for grazed lands, it is a huge opportunity to do that win-win-win. And I think that's really looking at some positive outcomes for our future. And I think that's a really bright outlook for Hawaii's sustainability goals.
Mahalo. McCabe, we're going to move on to you. You touched on this a little bit prior when you introduced yourself, but for those of us who aren't familiar, go ahead and tell us a little bit about what is giant king grass, and tell us about its versatility and its regenerative properties.
Okay. So giant king grass in particular, that variety was developed by a company called Biospace Inc. out of Southern California. It is, again, the supergiant king grass in particular was developed as a hybrid Napier grass. And there's a lot of really intriguing properties of the variety that they've developed. And again, some of the things are not just unique to this particular variety of the Napier grass family. But again, when you look at the regenerative qualities of the perennial grasses in general, those grasses are notoriously good at building up your soil profile. Again, what happens with these plants is they typically will go down to a root zone of about 18 to 24 inches. And then what happens is they begin to develop this root ball system that continues, because again, it's a perennial variety, that you're not disturbing that soil for 5 to 7 years. So you plant it and then 5 to 7 years of just soil buildup with these, again, these Napier crops such as the supergiant cane grass. And so, again, as that happens, it also develops a very robust and vigorous microbiology colony in the soil as well. And so again, this is a particular variety that has unique benefits to it out of the Napier family. But again, just as you look at grass species in general, they are extremely beneficial to the soils. And again, they especially build up that they regenerate that soil extremely well and avoid a lot of soil disturbance while they're growing. And so I'm sure I missed some other things there, but anyway, I'll get into more details later, I suppose. But yeah.
Yes, we haven't heard everything. David, we're going to move over to you now. You're someone with a tremendous amount of experience. How did you become an advocate of regenerative agriculture, and what regenerative practices are you implementing out at Mountain View Farms?
Okay, I have to read through my notes because I got 3 minutes, and I really want to go through this real fast. Okay, we were one of the largest dairies on Oahu, and we were asked to shut down. So we basically sat idle for 6 years trying to figure out what do we do that is sustainable farming in the definition of minimum or no dependency on imports and oil. We really don't have an existing program in the state, and everyone wants to do this, but we really don't have a program that makes sense. Then in 2012, we started to implement Korean natural farming, which is a progression of regenerative farming on 2 different levels, one side plants, one side animals. Now that is totally insane if you're going to start something brand new to take 2 ends of the spectrum and try to work it at the same time. So insanely, we moved forward. We grew Moringa oleifera, better known locally as malunggay. We do this without plowing, without disking, harrowing, rototillering the ground. We use no fertilizer, herbicides, or pesticides. We only use microbes and enzymes. The prevailing thought was that plants will never make it without fertilizer and sprays because disease, insects, and weeds will totally overcome them. The good news is the plants are doing super well, and there is no disease or insect damage. Recently, we had the soil tested for 262 hydrocarbon compounds. Not only did we test below FDA action levels, it tested totally not detectable across all 262 compounds. Even the lab had to call us and tell us this is quite unique, and what the heck are you doing? Microbes are the most efficient way to clean up and rehabilitate soil. Recently, we got certified organic, hallelujah, and that just demonstrates all life begins in the soil. So on the livestock side, it's even crazier. We're raising pigs without the use of a wastewater lagoon and no composting facility, without the use of vaccines, antibiotics, supplements, hormones, steroids, and they are not fed any commercial feed. They are fed a vegetarian diet with microbes and enzymes. The prevailing thought, this is not possible, you're insane. So insanely we started again, and then we were declared a potential health hazard because we are not using any vaccines and antibiotics. Vaccines are necessary because pigs have certain types of viruses that will severely impact the herd's death rate. Antibiotics are necessary to manage diarrhea and pneumonia, which are major issues in any of these operations. The good news, there is no waste odor at all and no waste issues. EPA has then recently declared that this wastewater in these lagoons is toxic and in hazardous conditions. On commercial operations on the mainland, there are huge acres and acres of these lagoons which they don't know what to do with, and they just keep building more, and sort of smell and all these other issues gets worse. We have no cases of diarrhea and pneumonia. Recently, interestingly, a herd above us, a vaccinated herd, incurred one of the viruses, and it wiped out 40% of their pigs. We were immediately quarantined, and because we were not vaccinated, they really got hard on us. We had no incidences, and the state later came in and blood tested the animals, and the antibiotics were extremely high. How is this possible? And that's the progression that really led us to understand that the digestive system produces 80% of the pig's immunity. And I thought the digestive system was really to digest food and make poop. Now, sitting there on the fence and you're watching all this happen and you're dumbfounded by why all this is possible, and really, is it real or is it in my imagination or am I going insane? And then when you sit there and you say the pig's biology system is very similar to man's, and if that's happening, is it happening in man? So we dug into the research, and guess what? Our digestive system also produces 80% of our immunity. And in addition, it has our second brain. What? How did the brain get there? Harvard and MIT have proven the gut-brain connection. So our understanding of irreparable brain damage and not being able to rejuvenate brain cells is false. This is a glimpse of the power of microbes and enzymes in healthy soil, and it continues to fascinate me.
Mahalo. Oh. So your brain and your, so trust your gut. Now we know. Also, it's right around 6:30. I want to just piggyback off what Denise said. At 6:45, right? So I think about 15 more minutes if you want to go and get that second drink before they start pulling the drinks. We're going to hana-ho now back up to the top with Hannah for round 2. What kind of support do local farmers and the industry at large need to encourage regenerative farming practices here in Hawaii?
Thanks. I think that's kind of like the million-dollar question here in Hawaii. There are a lot of expectations that we put on farmers, and I think that we're expecting them to feed us, we're expecting them to feed more of us in the future, and we have to be really careful with what we ask of them if we're not going to give them those resources and support that they really need to do regenerative practices. And a fundamental aspect of that is making sure that what they're doing is profitable for them. And it seems obvious, but it's often overlooked when we're at that discussion table and figuring out what are we going to put into these programs that help farmers. It's about farm viability. And I'll tell you a secret, if it's not viable, it's not that great of an idea. People aren't going to do it. And regenerative agriculture takes time, so it might not be profitable right away, but it does need to have something profitable in the future. And if we want to get serious about this, then we have to think about some of those new ideas that we haven't tried yet. And I think some of those ideas can be environmental incentive programs. You think about this opportunity that I mentioned that farmers have to participate in watershed recharge. They have pieces of land and they can help us replenish the aquifers that we have here on island. And there's a lot of agencies on island that are really interested in that. They're interested in our drinking water quality. They're interested in our marine water quality. And I think it's a great passage to say, hey, if there's an incentive to target the source of that potential issue and make it an opportunity, why don't we think of some ways where we can maybe pass that opportunity towards the farmers and have it coming from places where we really care, and there is money and there's places to do that and provide support. I think another great way to do that is to invite the owners of lands to properties, properties to the conversation table and say, we recognize that a lot of farmers in Hawaii are small leasing operations, and they don't have simply the money to afford producing food and also to be thinking about those long-term balances for natural resources, and it's not a realistic expectation. So how can we help get that conversation started with owners of land and find that incentive and put the profitability in their pocket for the future so that they want to make that investment and they want to do that practice. That's something that has been a challenge, and I think it's a great bridge to cross and get into that opportunity. How can we shape those programs? I don't know. I think we need to work on that and find that link to support farmers better in that way and also support owners in that way. I would say that one of the ways that we do that as an organization, I think we do a great job, is we support farmers on the ground. We give them opportunities to receive funds, and we give them support to tell them, hey, this is a great practice that worked for other people. I think this would work for you based on my professional experience. And we need more people like that. We need more funding to go into those programs, because that's something that really caters to this broad spectrum of operations that we have in Hawaii, because it's not a one-size-fits-all operation. And we can't treat farmers like that. So I think it's great when we can support them on that individual basis and give them the attention that they need to say, this is what you need, and this is what might work really well for you. And one other thing I'll say that I think works really well to support farmers here in Hawaii is the farmer-to-farmer learning networks. That's not coming from me as a scientist, it's coming from another farmer, and it's a farmer that's saying, I tried that, and it didn't work, don't do it. Or I tried that and it worked really well for me, and you and I are on a similar soil and we're both grazing livestock, so let's both try this thing and talk about it with one another. I think that's an amazing opportunity that farmers have here in Hawaii, and our organization is really looking forward to the next year that we have of providing that opportunity to farmers and enhancing their ability to support each other while we learn from them and let them teach us how we can better support them as well.
Mahalo, Hannah. McCabe, we're going to move over to you. How is the growth of giant king grass contributing to Hawaii's overall food security and helping to pave the way for sustainability and self-sufficiency?
Thank you. Yes. So when you look at how giant king grass plays into the food supply security for the state of Hawaii, it really comes down to looking at the livestock industry as a vital component of the food security for the state. And so with that type of perspective and through that lens, giant king grass in particular, through the studies that we've conducted on it, through field trials and through commercial growing of that crop, what's really unique about that particular variety for livestock in particular is it's got an interesting, very high yielding capacity. So it's got the ability to produce a lot of forage per acre. And so you get a lot of, just a lot more animal feed on a per acre basis compared to a lot of the crops that are currently being grown for livestock feed here. And forage is becoming a scarcity around the globe, especially with the droughts that are occurring. And so, again, this is also a more drought-tolerant plant. But again, the more forage that we can enable our local livestock industry to produce, the better. What's also really unique, though, is the fact that with this variety is, when we're cutting this at 6 feet in height for animal feed, what we're finding is that the nutrition is extremely high for animal performance, both for beef cattle and also for dairy cattle. So what we find in this is through the studies with the supergiant king grass is that the crude protein, if you're cutting this thing at 6 feet in height, it's got a crude protein of over 15%, which is really unusual for a grass hay. On top of that, though, you also have very high digestible fiber. So you're looking at NDFD30 of around over 60%. I don't want to get into too much detail, but and then it's got high energy content as well. And between those things, what you find is if you have beef cattle in particular that you're raising, this on a per pound basis, using this instead of other hay mixes, for the forage component of that animal's diet, you will definitely see an increase in the average daily gain. We've seen around 11 to 20% increase in the average daily gain on beef cattle, which is extremely remarkable. again, and this is on very high-yielding crops. And then on top of that, we've seen increased milk production in dairy cattle, and assuming that it has the same effect on cow-calf operations for the cattle there. So again, we've seen increase in milk production, and all of those things combined just mean that with less input on an acre basis, so with the same water, actually less water with the same land, less fertilizers, etc., you're getting a lot of output, and you're getting a lot more milk production and a lot more beef production. So again, that contributes significantly to the food security for the state of Hawaii. So,
David, we're going to move over to you. How can the community learn about regenerative agriculture and how to practice it in their home gardens?
Okay. We need to kind of connect regenerative agriculture to human health. We tend to look at regenerative agriculture as regenerative agriculture and human health as human health. We need to connect the two. Okay, so on one side, we are the richest, smartest, most technologically advanced, and pay the highest health insurance in the world. On the other side, we have the lowest longevity of any developed country in the world. Now, how can that be? We rank only 47th in the longevity globally. We lead the world in every chronic disease. We have the highest incident rate of heart attacks, strokes, cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, lupus, dementia, Alzheimer's, and on. I cannot get it from you, you cannot get it from me. This is totally internally generated. So when this happens, most of us say it is genetic, or we say just plain bad luck. Not so. We have a new field called epigenetics, and it says we have 9,000 RNA DNA in our gene set. Guess that the microbes in our digestive system have 20 million RNA DNA. These RNA DNA are the mechanisms that turn off and on our DNA and RNA. So if you have a bronchogene and it's not turned on, it's not effective. Then what can we do to help the 20 to 30 trillion microbes in our digestive system to improve our immunity, health, and longevity? We really have the ability to influence our gene expression and our mitochondria function through diet, lifestyle, and thoughts. That's the most powerful medicine. Regenerative agriculture coupled with the use of microbes and enzymes will produce food that has no chemicals and is nutrient and microbial dense. So we have had the ability to help many type 2 diabetics get totally off insulin and metformin, take them down to 0. And they have no diabetes, and their blood glucose is perfectly normal. This is on one side. Now, Western perception of diabetes is it's an end game. We cannot reverse it. We can only manage and control it, or try and manage and control it. On the other side, we have enabled couples who have had severe fertility issues to achieve pregnancies. We have helped 6 couples and have number 7 on its way. So how can you move from one side of the medical spectrum to the other side of the medical spectrum? It's because you're enabling your microbiome to heal your body and balance your body. Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. Steve Jobs, who was a super genius, on his deathbed wrote the last letter, and he said, let food be your medicine or medicine will be your food. And Wigmore said, the food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. Super clean foods that are nutritionally and microbial dense are critical to our health and longevity. We have built planter boxes we call pharmacy boxes. You just plant and harvest. No fertilizer is needed, no sprays are needed. After you harvest, you just replant. You don't replace the soil, you don't work the soil, you don't till the soil, and you definitely don't put fertilizer because it then kills microbes. So we've installed them in Manoa, in the Pali area, and everyone said it's too much rain, it's not going to work. It's working fine. We've installed them in Hawaii Kai, and it's working fine. We've put some in Mililani, Kailua, Waimanalo, and it's all working fine. When you use these boxes, you are helping to reduce global warming. Why? Because the plants are now using photosynthesis. If you don't feed them fertilizer, they have to work. Once they start working, through photosynthesis, they are the most efficient form of taking carbon dioxide and out of the air and sequestering carbon in the soil. You then use the box, you have control over your food, you know what is generating the food, you're less dependent on imported food, you're rebuilding your microbiome and your health. Regenerative agriculture is the only course to achieve this. So just think, Hawaii can be the next blue zone, where people can be in their hundreds, are self-sufficient, mentally sharp, no pain, and no chronic disease. That's our goal.
Again, gang, we're going to hano that clap. Thank you to McCabe, Hannah, and David for being part of the panel discussion tonight and sharing your expertise with all of us. Also, good news, gang. I was told you've got about another 5 to 10 minutes with the wine, actually. They were going to pull it at 6:45. You have another 5 to 10 minutes to keep enjoying. Also, at this time, we actually want to welcome Wayne back up to the stage. We're going to open it up now to an audience Q&A. We have 2 microphones that are going out into the audience, so we're doing it classroom style. Obviously, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. We will navigate a microphone and get it to you. Everyone who is watching on Zoom, aloha, we are having a good time in person. And make sure you drop your questions in the Zoom link in the Q&A box to everybody on Zoom. But right now, we're just going to open it up to anyone who has a question. And I see one.
Aloha, and thank you for all the panelists for an excellent discussion. For the farmers to go and make their own inputs, yeah, for the natural farming inputs. And so how do we come to a place where we as community can begin to absorb and have better practice around the inputs that are coming into our community? So how do communities adapt to have Hawaiian natural farming better integrated and the inputs come into their community so that we can get to a higher platform of practice of what is happening in Waianae right now?
Our experience has been, if you try to be a perfectionist, that's an issue. But the reality is, diversity of microbes is the more key focus. So once you got diversity of microbes and the function of time, the microbes will adapt. So we can produce microbes and put it all over the state, and they will adapt. But the function is time. We need time. But if you're starting, so theoretically, correctly, if you take the microbes from Waianae, they will function very well in Waianae. If you take the microbes from Hawaii Kai, they will function very well in Hawaii Kai. If you take the microbes, but that's when you're first starting. So you're starting with 0 base time. So now if you take the microbes from Waianae and you put them in Hawaii Kai and you give them 6 months and a year, they'll adapt. That's the part that we need to kind of factor.
Mahalo, David. Any other questions, gang? Right over here. The mic is on the way.
Mr. Wade, I teach at a local middle school with a focus on sustainability, but I grew up farming in Indiana. I milked cows and baled hay all summer. So this is all very fascinating to me. How does your product reduce soil compaction? That's very fascinating to me.
Well, I guess I should pick this up and use it. All right. Well, first of all, the soil microbes, if you have a good diversity of soil microbes, and you have the protozoa and you have the other animals that live in the soil, then we create those pathways for air and water. You've got to have that. Without that, you're going to have compaction. So if you have it, the soil can hold water. A soil that holds water will hold nutrient. So the more water holding capacity we have, the more nutrient value we have, and the more diversity of microbes you're going to have in the soil. There's not just bacteria. It's bacteria, fungi. I mean, you need that whole diversity.
Thank you, Wayne. Next question. I see her. The mic is on the way. How's dinner going, gang? No one's talking. I'm assuming it's good.
Aloha, I'm Wendy. I work in Kunia at Hark, working with Keiki in middle school and high school. And this is a step beyond the other middle school teacher. When you say that the microbes increase the organic material in the soil, is that because they promote more root growth and then those roots are increasing the organic material and reducing the compaction? So my question is about the organic material production or increased organic material production in the soil.
Who are you referring that question to?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. When
Somebody.
Okay. Well, first of all, your microbes are decomposing, okay, the material there. It's that decomposition, okay, that creates the humus. You've created your organic matter. That's your true organic matter.
Mm-hmm. David, real quick, also just to comment on that too, I think as well, just if you might correct this, but as those break that down as well, what you're looking for is making the nutrients in that soil, that organic matter more available as well. And so those microbes are crucial for helping make the nutrients there a lot more accessible and available to the plant. So just to add to that.
Next question, right over here in the middle, table number 6.
Hannah, you talked about water recharge and what the farmers deliver to that, yeah? And it was interesting because I'm on the Board of Water Advisory Board, yeah? And I would have never thought about something like that, but you know what? It's a great idea that we need to pay farmers for what they do. I mean, even in the environment, in conservation and everything else. I mean, at some point, this state needs to realize that farmers deliver more than just the food and everything else. They take care of the land, they take care of the water, everything else. And if you can't depend on that, then as a state and as a community going forward, we're going to be messed up. So I'm going to ask you, Hannah, and I'm going to put your name in for the Board of Water Supply Advisory Board, because These are the kinds of ideas that, you know, I mean, I'm on it. I was a former farmer, but I'm passé. Okay, so if you'd be willing to, you know, I want to talk to you after this, okay?
That's awesome, and I
Thank
would be
you.
happy to speak with you further. I think farmers have this, you know, excellent responsibility, which is, you know, it's a lot of responsibility, but I think we can help them. And I think it's really an exciting opportunity to think that that's something that appeals to you too, considering, you know, what board you're sitting on and what voice you have in the community. It's a great way to help farmers make their operation profitable and to do great work, because they're really the warriors on the front line when it comes to natural resource regeneration and resiliency here in Hawaii. We're going to face a lot of issues in the future, and I think that's just the group of people who has, you know, so much opportunity to take care of the land. And I think whatever we can do to help them, coming from places that have resources like the Board of Water Supply, I think that's an excellent idea, and thank you for posing that. I would be happy to speak with you further.
Is there any kind of labeling protocol for regenerative agriculture, thinking about the same kind of model for organic products that kind of would give consumers a guide to make those purchase decisions, right? Because if we're talking about taking care of the Aina and all that stuff, I mean, I know for me personally, that would impact my decision making. If I was in the store and I saw something that was, you know, where I felt that the product was there for taking care of the land and giving back in a way, for me, it's almost even maybe more of an incentive than an organic label to make that decision. And then that economically transfers as benefit to the farmers, you know. So I'm kind of wondering if there's anything like that. And then secondly, for Hannah, I was wondering if there's, you know, you talk about incentivizing opportunities for the farmers. Are there specific government incentives, or are there, and maybe what can the private sector do in terms of those incentives, providing those incentives as landlords, landowners, that kind of thing?
Yeah, those are great questions. To address the first one, as far as labeling goes, if anyone can correct me, I'm not 100%, but I don't believe there is a regenerative label that's accepted out here yet. You know, a lot of times the organic label does a great job of doing that. There are a lot of practices pertaining to the organic practices that are going to do regenerative work. But I think since we're a small community, one of the ways that you can address that, despite a label at this time, which I think is a great idea, and I would really support that if that's something that we could get in action. You're not alone. I would also love to have that information available when I'm at the store. But because we're a small community, you know, we have a limited amount of farmers that are really catering and producing for our local markets. And I think getting to know your farmer or speaking with someone like myself where I can make some recommendations of farms that I know that are doing great work and are doing those regenerative practices, you know, and then just looking out for their labels at the store and trying to support them or joining their local CSA program, which is Community Supported Agriculture. So you can get basically like a weekly or monthly subscription to them, and that's an awesome way to support a farmer that you really like personally, that you pick out, you know, and feel that it's doing some good work for the landscape. So, and then your second question, remind me what that was. It was the... Sure. So, you know, there are a lot of programs that incentivize. There are federal and state programs that provide incentives for farmers and give them money to put that stuff in the ground that's recommended. We call them best management practices. And that's available. A lot of people are eligible for that as farmers. I would say one caveat to that is that it can be difficult to, you know, get through that system of getting the funds, figuring out how to use them, and some farmers are not eligible, and that sometimes pertains to the larger scale operations. And, you know, we want them to be included in those programs just as much as smaller farmers that maybe are not as profitable. But I think that's a place where we really need to grow, is creating incentives. You know, some ways you can do that as a consumer is you can buy local produce. So that's just going directly back to the producers that are doing a good job. You can also donate to operations and organizations that are doing that meaningful work on the ground and supporting farmers. That kind of directly incentivizes them and helps them get grant funds. And then I would say lastly, a great way to do that is to use your voice legislatively. every cycle we see multiple bills coming through that are going to support farmers by either giving them sometimes even up to like 100% reimbursement for cover crops or compost. And that's, you know, something that every person in this room has the ability to do and can log in, submit testimony, and say, I really support that. And that money can then help incentivize and create the opportunity for the farmer to tap into that account and, you know, bring money into their farm for doing good work.
Next question, table 12.
I had a question regarding the farm boxes and whether that could be used as an educational tool for schools, and also where would we get some?
It's a great educational tool, and it changes everybody's perspective of how agriculture can be thought of. So we've put some in schools and asked the students to evaluate how the crops are growing, and we put them in their existing garden areas. So ultimately we say, okay, so the person that, so how do you like the produce that is being grown in your box? Fantastic. What did you do? Oh, we really didn't do anything. Okay. So if you look on the other side, where the people are plowing, disking, harrowing, spraying, fertilizing, composting, they're working hard. So is their produce better, same, or worse than yours? And they're saying, well, and then I ask them, why is this happening? And they say, well, Uncle, we don't know. I said, well, you have a phone in your hand. I think you should check it. So Google and ask, and they stumble across microbes. And then I say, okay, so what does Google tell you about microbes? And they start doing research, and guess what? They get pretty smart very fast. And they understand a lot of what Mr. Wade is saying very quickly. So yes, that is an excellent tool to teach students about regenerative agriculture.
At this time, gang, we're going to go ahead and close the Q&A. How about one more hand for our panel? To go ahead and wrap things up, we're going to welcome back to the stage Denise Yamaguchi. Thanks, guys.
Why don't we give our MC Kainoa a big round of applause. So I want to thank our panelists tonight, McCabe, Hannah, and David, and also our keynote speaker, Wayne Wade, for joining us for Eat, Think, Drink, and also to all of you for making our first in-person event a huge success. I also want to thank our executive chef, Joseph Almagura, and his team here at Prince Waikiki who prepared the bentos, and also Honolulu Meat Company for donating the beef for tonight's event. As our program comes to an end, so has a complimentary beverage service. The Prince Waikiki will open a cash bar in a few minutes, so you're welcome to stay and just mingle and talk story. Our panelists are here tonight for a little bit, so if you haven't got your question answered, you can always come and see them here. As a kind reminder, please keep your masks on unless actively eating or drinking. And finally, I want to send another big mahalo to our partners at Eggs Hawaii for supporting us by offering to all of you here on Oahu a dozen eggs from Hawaiian Made or Kalei Eggs. You'll be receiving an email tomorrow with more information on how you can collect your eggs. On behalf of the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation, mahalo for joining us and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.